Welcome back to Interview At. My name is Brandon Watson. I'm a former senior executive of Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle. I've founded some companies and I've been an early employee at some startups some you've probably never heard of. The point there is I know how to hire across all points of the growth curve at most companies. I've had many teams, large and small, and been involved in hundreds of hiring decisions. Here at Interview At, what we do is we break down mock interview segments of real interviews that I've conducted for candidates who are looking to get jobs, their dream jobs as they move up in their tech career or outside of the tech industry. If you do find this content interesting, please go ahead and leave a like or subscribe, and certainly leave any question you'd like to see or any leadership principle that you'd like to see covered down below. Now, we use the leadership principles from Amazon to bucket up feedback because it's helpful for the candidates, but it also gives a bit of consistency in the feedback that I give on this channel. And this week we have a, call it a junior-ish, early career, not quite mid-career candidate who is targeting a product manager role at Facebook, although it's really called a growth engineer. And the question that we're focusing on is a leadership principle targeted around invent and simplify. The specific question was about finding a simple solution to a complex problem. So we'll jump right into it, and as the interview goes on, I will break down things that the candidate should either stop doing, start doing, do more of, do less of, and help you understand how you can overperform in your job interview.
So very often people will say that the simplest solution is the best. That's kind of a weird tautological statement, but true. So tell me about a particularly complex problem that you solved with a very simple solution.
Okay. So
just as a general point of order here, if you're going to take a break and you're going to think about your question, think about your answer, just kind of tell the interviewer. It's generally helpful.
At my previous company, I was on the data science team, and we were focused on improving our bottom of funnel conversion. We were seeing great conversion at top of funnel where users would come to our platform, and it was a real estate marketplace. They would submit an application, and our revenue recognition event was actually when we were able to get that application to a property and get that lease eventually signed. But we were seeing our lease signings at a very low conversion percent. And the current process for determining if someone had actually converted through, to getting their lease signed was sending over the property a list of the leads and saying, hey, did any of these people convert through, and waiting for the property a month, 2 months later to say, hey, yeah, X, Y, and Z converted. So one of the
Wait a minute, where's the incentive in that system for them not to cheat?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You're 100% right. So one of the solutions.
Now, I probably jumped in a little bit early there with the follow-up question, but what this candidate actually did a very good job of was setting up the situation and the task ahead of him, although I jumped the gun there a bit on getting to the task, so that's on me as a bad interview faux pas. Despite the fact this is an early-ish career candidate, I would say from a star structure format, and if you're not familiar with the star structure, there's plenty of YouTube videos on it, but when you think about your situation, S, task, T, action, A, result, R, your setup or act one of your answer should clearly define the stakes, clearly define what the problem was, who had the problem, who your customer was, whatever, and what you needed to do about it, and what was at risk if you didn't do those things. And he was well on his way to getting there. And certainly from our junior employee, that when you're interviewing candidates, you kind of level set what you're looking for in terms of answers. So I don't expect someone at this level, this early in an interview, to kind of nail it. But so far, it's actually fairly quite good.
Because there was a lot of discrepancies between what the properties were saying and what our records showed. And when we would follow up with students to say, hey, did you end up signing? One of the proposed solutions was saying, okay.
Now, before we get into the solution, here's an opportunity. Especially if you're interviewing at Amazon, but if you interview anywhere and you're trying to kind of up-level your role and demonstrate that you really know how to get things done, metrics matter. And this is a case where the candidate could have used metrics to state, we had a hit rate of X% and we wanted to elevate it to Y%, right? But he didn't do that. It's fine. He's junior and it's not going to hold it against him, but it definitely would have elevated his answer that much more.
Let's create an integration between our system and the respective property management systems. So that way, anytime a student can create an application, we can just send it directly into the property management system, which is like how they work through their process. The problem with that was a lot of these properties, especially the owners of the property management system, didn't want to open up their API and allow us to send our information into them. So as we're thinking through potential ideas, one of the ideas I proposed was saying, hey, why don't we just go to our property partners, ask them for, let's pretend that we ourselves are like leasing staff, ask them for an account, and anytime we get a lead, we'll log into their respective account and add the lead information in that way. So almost as if we're, part of the property staff as well. So I had taught myself robotic process automation, and using UiPath, I developed a proof of concept where depending on which lead the property was for, I would get the login information after asking for the property for like an account. And then I would go through, and the automation would log into the account and then create the lead. And from there, we had a source of truth to see, okay, what the status of the lead was, as well as if the lead eventually converted.
So I'm going to pause here. There's so much win in this answer, right? So far up to this point. Clearly established what the problem was, right? They had leads that were going into a system they had no way of tracking. Proposed a solution as part of a team. So he said, we as a team were iterating. I proposed, right? So it's he can take ownership of his answer, but at the same time that he's functioning in the context of a team. Goes on to propose a solution, which as he frames it, he says, hey, we just get the login information. And my brain, I remember when I was doing this interview, my brain initially went to, yeah, of course, it makes sense, hire a VA in the Philippines. But he took it one step further, which is not just get the login information, but then I'm going to use UiPath to automate this so we can do, robotic process automation. And when the lead comes in, I push a button and the stuff goes in. We actually don't need a VA lead, right? So there's a lot of kind of levels to this answer. And so far, it's great structure, but also especially over level delivered in terms of quality for someone at this level.
So the short-term impact of that was our lead attribution numbers started reconciling back from, I need to figure out what it was before, but I know like our invoices were able to be closed out within a month's time, which had never happened prior to developing this automation.
Did you catch that? He understands that this is a mock interview. We do mock interviews, and I encourage everyone to do mock interviews, real mock interviews, not with like friends who aren't going to ask you hard questions, but real mock interviews to challenge you as you go into your interview prep. And he actually caught himself right there realizing he didn't have the metric. He didn't have it. He needed it. He wanted it. He made a note, and he's going to go get it. Again, he's just doing a great job here.
So to summarize, the problem we were having was lead attribution and poor conversion in the bottom of our funnel, and I was able to solve that not by using an API, but more so just asking the property for a login and then using robotic process automation to get that lead eventually into their property management system.
What was the inspiration or the motivation for your particular solution?
There's two parts to that, right? So the motivation was I didn't want to wait for.
What? No, hold on. I'm not asking the motivation of why you did. I'm asking for what spawned the idea in your head that this was what you should try. What was the source of the creative leap to get to that answer?
Mm-hmm. So I spent some time brainstorming with people who had been on the team, trying to understand, okay, what have they done historically? And then I was thinking, well, I was thinking like, what is the least amount of friction for these leasing staff agents? I understood that the leasing staff agent was like a part-time college student and they didn't stay in the job long enough. So for them to understand our startup's process of like reconciling and figuring out like which leads were from, I'm going to say from our startup versus like another one of the channels I assumed was complicated for their leasing staff. So I wanted to come up with a solution that was extremely simple, and just pulling from historical experience in terms of from when I was working at a consulting firm doing system implementations, I found there was less pushback when we're implementing a system when there was like, when the new process resembled like the old process as close as possible, like within, not too much variation. So I was trying to come up with a solution that enabled the leasing staff to work within their own system.
So one of the reasons why I asked this question, if you've watched enough of my videos, you've heard kind of parts of this, but certainly anybody who goes through an interview at mock interview, when they get the follow-up session, one of the things I really harp on is the STAR format is great. It's great for bucketing up your content. It's great for beginning, middle, end, right? It's great for storytelling and helping the human mind of the interviewer kind of keep up with what you're saying. But I add on to that, right? There's STAR light method. Problem, action, result, but parlate sounds stupid, so here we are. But LITE stands for learning, insight, teaching, and example. Always have an example of one of those three things. What was the learning, i.e. what did I take away from this and what am I going to use in a future role? What was the insight? How did we come up with this? What is the teaching? What did I make sure the rest of my organization understood, whether it's up, sideways, or down in your organization? The reason for this is because, again, your job is to get the job, is to win the interview. And you do that by standing out, and you stand out by having that extra bit, right? And this is, I asked the question, right? It was a leading question for sure, but as a candidate, there is no reason why you can't say to the interviewer, by the way, it's a really funny story how we came up with this, or some variant of that, right? For the insight, gosh, we were working through this problem, we were really racking our brains, and the way we came up with this, oh man, I'm so proud of what we did as a team. There's a million ways you can work that in, but then you offer to the interviewer. Sort of. You've said it. I could talk about that if you want, or hey, you want me to tell you more about that? Again, you're interacting now. It's a back and forth. It's no longer an interview. It's a conversation. And by doing that, you're giving them a freebie question for an answer you've already prepared that makes you look like a superstar. So you win all the way around, but you're doing so in a way that's going to, again, do your job, which is to get the job at the company you want to get the job at. So this is just something for you to think about as you kind of go through your interview prep. Is the STAR method is fine, but you should always have that standby follow-up, which is one of the following, just one of the following. Did I learn? What was the insight for how we got there? What did I teach the rest of the organization? That's it.
That's where the inspiration came from.
Okay. What other solutions did you consider but reject? You specifically, not the firm.
Yeah. I'm thinking here.
Yeah, not his best moment here, right? If you're going to be a product leader, team lead of any kind, you're building things, systems inside of a company, at the higher levels, right? The high tempo, high pace, big output, big name companies that many people want to go work for, whether it's in the tech space or otherwise. Your value is, do you have demonstrable and repeatable pathways to success, right? Frameworks for how you do things that gives the person interviewing you confidence that should you come into their organization, you are bringing with you a set of tools that says to them, I know how to do this over and over again. And that question about, well, what things did you consider and reject? That's about their ideation, right? I'm trying to get at the candidate's ideation process, and his slowness to answer this question tells me they might have just gone with the first answer, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing. But you should have a process, and you should probably have one or two things when you're thinking about like presenting something that you worked on. You should always kind of know, what else did we think about, or how did we frame this problem? And if you got lucky enough that your first answer was the right one, cool. But really what this is getting at is, what is the framework for ideation? And his pause here kind of indicates that, to me as an interviewer, gosh, maybe he doesn't have that tool in his toolshed. Junior guy, so far the answer is really, really good. And he's definitely trending way high on the higher scale, just given what kind of level role he's going for. But that's just a note for anyone watching this video, things to think about when you're going and prepping for interviews.
Another example was having someone on our business development team going into the respective properties office once a month to reconcile those respective invoices. That way, they'd be able to be have like the lead attribution and conversion information within a timely manner. So instead of waiting 2-3 months for that invoice to be filled, we'll have that insight within the month. The reason I didn't think that would work is at the time we were working with, I think 19 out of the top 25 like property management companies in Texas and Florida. So to hire that number of business development representatives wouldn't have worked. And I thought this solution, the only like blocker would be getting that leasing account created, which is why I went with the automation solution instead of the manual business development workaround.
Okay. So overall, I thought the candidate great. I mean, this was really a good answer, especially given the level of the candidate. What I have here in front of me, I'm going to read the notes. The screen's over here, so I'm not going to be looking at the camera, but I'm going to read the notes. This is the assessment that would have been read into the room had I been on the candidate loop. And I share this with the candidate as well. Invent and simplify. This was a very good showing for the candidate. The solution was elegant and very clearly solved a real problem which the business was facing. Candidate demonstrated that they had considered alternatives, although he had to be prompted, and ways in which the problem could be solved. In addressing an improved mechanism for attribution, the candidate drove value for the organization and the customer base. So again, great answer. One thing I personally, as just a product snob, I would have liked to have heard more about was the actual solve. He talked about it at a high level, robot process automation and using remote UI or UI path, but I don't need him to get to the bits and bytes of how he solved it, but more how did that work across the different systems? How many different systems were it? How long did it take it to get set up with a particular customer? Did you have to do it custom modeled for a system or custom modeled for the customer? Like just understanding the scope of the complexity of that and the maintenance of that, and quite frankly, the durability of that solution over time. How long was it in place? He talked a little bit about the ability to reduce the cycle times to getting attribution, which is great. But that would have been a plus answer as opposed to an A+ answer, right? So it's not to knock the candidate, but for those who are watching these videos and kind of wonder, all right, well, what else could I have done? Or, what would a more senior leader have thought about as a guy who's been a chief product officer type guy? These are the things I would have wanted to know from someone I was interviewing, just to kind of understand how they think, but also that they think more holistically about their solutions. So hopefully this has been a great video. This is a new one for me in terms of being a growth engineer at Facebook. Good news, the candidate got the job, is working at Facebook. He's a superstar. Was really excited to help him out in his process. You can always sign up for your free interview at interviewatt.com. The calendar does tend to fill up though, so I apologize. I only do so many of these a week. We'll be back next week with another mock interview segment that we hopefully will teach you how to leverage the Amazon leadership principles to overperform in your interviews and get your dream job.